The Lord of Darkness, Part 1, The End of the World. Chapter 2, Envy and Wrath. Heaven is infinite, so obviously it isn't in the same universe as Earth. There are three primary universes that we focus on: the cosmos, heaven, and hells. The cosmos is the universe you humans live in before you die. Heaven is the idyllic universe where all celestials eventually live. There is one hell for each chosen world, but all hells are contained within a single universe, and no one lives there forever. In heaven, we have a room of worlds, which contains green portals to the various worlds in the cosmos that we watch over. We can teleport anywhere in the multiverse, but we lock active worlds so they can only be accessed through portals. Once we're in the cosmos, we're invisible, inaudible, and intangible, but we can choose to change any or all of them. We often float rather than stand on the ground because it makes for a smoother transition between degrees of tangibility. Artists came to use wings to depict our tendency to hover in the air. Although we lock interworld teleportation, intra-world teleportation has no limits. We teleport by momentarily transforming our bodies into photons, quantum entangling ourselves with photons at our destination, quantum teleporting ourselves to said destination, then dispelling the entanglement and returning to whatever form of matter we choose. We also use photic forms to transition into your visible spectrum, so we momentarily appear as humanoid figures made of pure light, inspiring the myth of halos. At some point, Nick started forming shadows around his halo because, well, he claims it's to avoid startling the living with blinding flash of light, but I don't buy it. If his goal were to avoid startling people, he'd simply obscure the necessary amount of light, instead of turning shadows into a spectacle. Eventually, he was doing it so often that he began affecting nearby shadows without meaning to, occasionally without realizing it. On more than one occasion, he's referred to himself as the Lord of Darkness, and you humans even associate him with darkness. More accurately, you associate darkness with evil and evil with Nick, but he manages to ignore that part. Seraphim have trouble thinking of darkness as anything but beautiful, since it's never been full of hungry beasts competing to eat us alive as it has been for some humans. When Nick entered the Room of Worlds, he was a little taken aback by how crowded it was. Normally, there are steady streams of people bustling about during the day, but that day it was packed. He pushed his way through the crowd to get to the Earth portal. There hadn't been a crowd around the Earth portal in ages. "No one gets through without an Earth pass," a guard was telling a disappointed group of Celestials, who were clearly dressed to appease some obscure cult's opinion of how the world should end. Nick strode to the front of the line and scanned his Earth pass. The guard was about to send him to the back of the line before he saw who it was. "Have a nice trip, sir." The Lord of Darkness hesitated, instantly suspicious of the guard's courteous attitude, but he didn't have time to pursue the matter. Instead, he replied, "I intend to," before determinedly stepping through the portal. Archdemons are responsible for strengthening a chosen people's path to salvation by supplying them with sufficient temptation. The name Archdemon is a bit of a misnomer. Unlike demons, who serve penance in hell until they earn their place in heaven, archdemons live in heaven and volunteer for assignments like angels. The role was originally conceived as a form of penance for celestials who'd earned their place in heaven and then sinned. They're typically more trustworthy than demons and less likely to need bespoke assignments, so it made sense to give them tasks that were necessary, undesirable, and unsuitable as penance for any current demons. Putting it into practice taught us two important truths. Heavenly celestials rarely committed major enough sins to warrant long-term penances, and the inconsistent influence of temptation could be catastrophic to a people's development. We realized that archdemons, like archangels, needed to serve for the full tenure of a chosen people, from Soul Age through Apocalypse Age, and therefore had to be volunteers. Nick decided to start by contacting the three archdemons whose votes he's lost long ago, just to get them over with. First on his list was Leviathan, Archdemon of Envy, who was posing as a fashion designer named Ethan Lavie and was preparing for a fashion show. Nick materialized outside the building and waded through the throngs of humans. He could have teleported to Leviathan's door, but he was determined to catch a few glimpses of an ordinary day on Earth, in case it was the last one. Nick paused to admire a small tree and fountain outside the entrance, ignoring the people who were forced to go around him. There was nothing special about the landscaping itself. It was simple but pretty. It made the devil feel preemptively homesick because it would all be over soon. He loved Earth, but it was more than that. He'd be expected to resign from the team after Earth ended. Quitting was better than being fired. For a seraph, being fired from an archangel team was like being disowned by your family, whereas quitting was more like deciding to gradually lose touch with your family over the next million years or so. Despite the last 11 and a half millennia, Nick was feeling a little reluctant to lose us. Nick claims this doesn't include Michael, but I don't buy it. How could you not regret saying goodbye to someone you've known since before the cosmos? Nick shook away the sentimental feelings and refocused on the task at hand. If he got enough archdemons on his side, he could delay the inevitable for at least another century or few. And even though Leviathan was a lost cause, he was determined to try. Once inside, Nick snagged the arm of a passing assistant and asked, "Can you point me towards Ethan Lavie?" The girl scoffed. "Not even if you had an appointment. I can give him your card and maybe he'll make time for you after the show," she said, as one might say, maybe tomorrow the sun will rise in the west. Nick gave her a special smile he's perfected over the years. It's intimidating without being threatening, compelling without being controlling, and mirthless without being cold. "You can give him my card now," Nick said quietly, but loud enough that she didn't miss a syllable in the hubbub around them. He swiped the shadows beside them, deftly molding them into the shape of a business card, which he handed to the assistant. She could feel the business card, and it felt like a normal business card, except it felt almost frictionless, although it didn't slip from her fingers, and almost weightless, although it didn't float away. It said the Lord of Darkness in shimmering black text on a dark gray background, but it could have said anything because she didn't even glance at it. She did, however, thread her way through the crowd and deliver the card to the so-called Ethan Lavie. Leviathan emerged with flourish moments later. Everything from his frost-tipped hair to his designer shoes looked, and was, expensive. His clothes were tailored to a close fit, and his green eyes were accented with eyeliner of the same emerald shade. His warm beige skin gave off a faint aroma of peppermint. Leviathan raised a polished eyebrow at Nick and said no, with no significant inflection, before turning on his heel and exiting through the curtain with more exaggeratingly dignified flourish than when he arrived. At that point, Nick lost all interest in the assistant, so I heard no further mention of her in his account, although I imagine she launched a tirade of protests at him as he strode through the curtain after Leviathan. "Absolutely not," Leviathan told Nick, assuming that Nick had followed him rather than bothering to glance back. "You don't even know why I'm here," the devil pointed out, somehow sticking to the archdemon like glue as he weaved through the coordinated chaos of clothing, stylists, and models. They moved through another curtain into a room with more mirrors than were worth counting, strategically positioned to not reflect each other. Leviathan took the opportunity to check his hair in one of them. "You're not the first to come here all fired up about the vote." "Who was?" asked Nick. Instead of answering, Leviathan turned abruptly to one of the passing stylists. "Now, darling, are you serious about those jeans, or is this some kind of statement?" "What?" she stammered. "I'm just saying what we were all thinking," asserted Leviathan. As the archdemon and devil resumed walking, the latter pointed out, "You're loving this." Leviathan shrugged noncommittally. "It's my job." "And who could be better at it?" Nick pressed. "I won't even dignify that with an answer." The devil nodded. "Why would you? You're the best, after all." "Now you're just saying things I already know," replied the archdemon. To a nearby human he asked, "Have you considered something less, this?" While indicating her entire outfit. "Maybe some better lipstick, at least. Something to take the focus off your figure." When she scurried away, Nick continued, "You broke families and toppled kings, but this is what you live for. You love this stage of worlds, and you hate starting over." "Yes, yes," Leviathan replied, picking at non-existent dirt on his impeccably manicured nails. Growing frustrated, Nick asked, "Do you got any objections?" Leviathan smirked. "Nothing comes to mind." "So why'd you say no?" Nick asked, demanding confirmation of what he already knew. Anger flared in Leviathan's emerald eyes. "You really have to ask after what you did to my husband." "I scratched him," the devil protested. "You made an example of him," Leviathan snapped. "You shattered his pride, and he's reminded of it every time he looks in a mirror for the rest of eternity." "Plus, you gotta look at it all day," Nick quipped under his breath. Archdemon Leviathan of Envy came very close to slapping him. "Yes, I liked his face better before. I liked it when it had a smile on it, you remorseless prick." Nick sighed. "Fair enough. Had to try." Just out of curiosity, what do you think my chances are? Of winning? Leviathan laughed. You have no chance. You pissed off way too many voters, and the rest aren't swinging in your favor either. What do you mean? Nick asked apprehensively. Just a hunch that you've counted your chickens before they hatched, said the Archdemon knowingly. Nick frowned. Huh. Well, thanks for the insight. I also need you to RSVP for the vote. He held out the signet, and Leviathan dutifully pressed his finger to it. Once all the required attendees did the same, we'd all be teleported to the Beige Void to discuss and vote on the impending apocalypse. I explicitly told the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse not to go to Earth until told otherwise, but they went anyway. They shouldn't have been able to get through security, but it was a believable oversight in the mayhem of the day. This was particularly problematic because these horses and riders comprised the apocalypse key for Earth, meaning their presence there would trigger the series of events culminating in Earth no longer existing. When the final horseman of the apocalypse rode through the portal onto Earth, it triggered a shockwave of seismic activity, causing massive earthquakes miles away. The moon shone down a blood-red light, as if the moment wouldn't have been ominous enough without it. On the other side of the world, humans watched in amazement as a passing comet eclipsed the sun and sent meteorites scurrying across the atmosphere. The apocalypse had arrived on Earth. Oblivious to the apocalypse's arrival, Nick continued his mission to persuade the archdemons to save Earth. Next on his list was Archdemon Azarox, Roxy, of Wrath. Humans knew her as Roxy Rage, head of a professional wrestling league. The Archdemon's effects don't affect Celestials, so it was purely personal that Nick angered easily around Roxy. The feeling was mutual. He lost Roxy's vote 3,095 years earlier when he slashed her powers on Earth. Archangel Nick of Penance and Faith walked into the Roxy Rage Wrestling League gym and was instantly assaulted by the heavy sense of sweat, sulfur, and anger. He willed himself to temporarily lose the sense of smell before striding further into the gym. Before he reached Roxy Rage's office, he was blocked by 2 overly muscular men in matching black t-shirts. According to Nick, they were completely identical, except for their faces and ethnicities. "Where do you think you're going?" demanded the one on the left in a way that would have intimidated most humans, but had no effect on Nick. "To see Roxy," Nick explained, pointing. "You got an appointment?" asked the one on the right. "I don't need one," replied the devil, smiling in a way that would have intimidated most seraphim, but had no effect on either human. "No one sees Ms. Rage without an appointment," growled the one on the left threateningly. They glared down at him, and Nick couldn't bite back a laugh. It was like a 4-year-old human challenging a professional bodybuilder to arm wrestling. It was adorably, amusingly absurd. The 2 bodyguards weren't used to this sort of treatment, but they boldly surged forward with their plans to flex their scowls and muscles menacingly. Nick checked the clock, decided he'd wasted enough time, and casually pushed both guards in the chests so hard that they flew back into the wall. Nick grimaced. Oops. With a glance, he verified the guards weren't seriously injured, not counting their pride. Even so, Nick couldn't resist a cheeky grin at one and a wink at the other as he sauntered up to Roxy Rage's office. He knocked rapidly on the door before opening it and striding in, despite it being locked. Per usual, Roxy was dressed in red, which matched her hair and eyes. Her red dress was tasteful but revealing, accentuating her curves in all the right ways. Her red heels were far too tall to be practical. Her red lipstick was a shade between a threat and a promise. "Why knock if you're just going to barge in?" Roxy demanded once Nick had shut the door behind himself. "And warned you I'm coming," explained Nick. Roxy scoffed and rolled her eyes. "Why are you here?" "To invite you to vote on postponing Earth's apocalypse," Nick told her. "Why the hell would you do that?" Roxy asked, perplexed. Then she smirked wickedly. "You fucking another human?" "Oh, wait, what am I saying? You couldn't even pull it off the first time." The shadows began to smolder as Nick struggled to keep a lid on his temper. "Humanity got back on track less than 2 millennia ago. They deserve more time in a good world." "Oh, you mean the good world you took from them?" Roxy retorted. "Face it, Nick. Humanity's been brewing since 9500 BC. They should have been reabsorbed right then, and you could have worked out your penance on some other world." Shadows rose around them like a blazing inferno as Nick snarled, "You take that back." "Or what?" Archdemon Roxy of Wrath hissed mockingly. "You'll violently attack me, a fellow seraph, today of all days? Even you won't do something that stupid." Nick glared at her while she smirked at him. She was right, of course. If he stepped out of line today, he'd lose the vote for sure. He mutely held out the signet, and the Archdemon of Wrath pressed her finger to it. "Cheer up, it's not the end of the world," Roxy cackled. She waved goodbye with her brightly manicured nails that were filed into claw-like points. Nick walked out of her office feeling disheartened, even though he'd known how it had turned out, just like he knew Leviathan and Lucifer were lost causes too. When he walked by the bodyguards, they tried to look intimidating, but the fear in their eyes was obvious. Nick stepped out of the building into a snowstorm, which was quickly blown away by a warm breeze. Globular mammatus clouds floated above him spookily, like the sky was slowly boiling. His t-shirt reconfigured to say, "That's not a good sign," for a few moments before changing back to his anti-apocalypse propaganda. Archangel Nick of Penance and Faith pulled up a screen and skimmed his Signs of the Apocalypse checklist. Erratic weather was right there between meteor showers and islands sinking into the sea. He checked celestial news feeds. There was no mention of Earth's apocalypse since the announcement that it was temporarily postponed for a vote. He switched to human news feeds and saw reports of islands sinking into the sea and mountains crumbling. Nick clapped his hands together and prayed, "Gabriel?" "Not a great time, Nick," I replied. "Tell me the truth. Did you guys send me to Earth just to get me out of the way so you could start the apocalypse?" "What? Of course not. Why would you even think that?" I exclaimed. "It sure seems like the apocalypse has started," said Nick, watching a tornado sweep across the street. "For starters, the weather's all over the place." I told him, "You're being paranoid. It's just regular weather. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm extremely busy." I ended the prayer.